A 16-year-old girl with no pilot training found herself alone in the cockpit of a small aircraft at 11,000 feet when the only qualified pilot on board collapsed without warning. The autopilot system had failed minutes earlier, and she had exactly one chance to land the plane before the fuel ran out or everyone died. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Sarah Mitchell was 16 when she stepped onto that 6-seater Cessna on a bright Saturday morning in rural Montana. She was flying with her uncle David, who owned a small charter service, and had offered to take her and 3 other passengers to a wedding in Billings. Sarah had always been curious about flying. She asked her uncle questions every time she saw him. How do planes stay in the air? What do all the buttons do? Why does the engine sound like that? David would smile and answer every single question with patience. He had been flying for 22 years and loved sharing his passion. Sarah sat in the co-pilot seat that morning, her eyes wide as David went through his pre-flight checks. He explained each step to her. Check the fuel, test the flaps, verify the instruments, make sure the radio works. Sarah watched and listened and memorized everything. She did not know why, but something told her to pay attention. David started the engine and the propeller roared to life. They taxied down the small runway and lifted into the Montana sky. The landscape below transformed into a patchwork of green fields and brown hills. Sarah felt her stomach drop as they climbed higher. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. 30 minutes into the flight, David turned to Sarah and pointed at the horizon. He showed her how to identify landmarks from the air. That river, that highway, that cluster of buildings. He told her that flying was all about staying oriented, knowing where you are and where you are going. Sarah nodded and kept looking out the window. The 3 passengers behind them were quiet, an older couple heading to their grandson's wedding and a young man traveling for work. Everyone seemed relaxed. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, light winds, nothing to worry about. But then something changed. Sarah noticed David rubbing his left arm. His face looked pale. She asked if he was okay, and he nodded, but his breathing had become shallow. He reached for the autopilot switch and engaged it. The plane leveled out and continued on its programmed course. David leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. He said he just needed a moment. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. Something was very wrong. She called out to the passengers and asked if anyone had medical training. The older woman said she used to be a nurse. She unbuckled and came forward. She checked David's pulse and her face went white. She said they needed to land immediately. David was having a heart attack. Sarah's hands started shaking. She looked at the instrument panel, at the dozens of dials and switches and screens. She had watched David fly, but watching and doing were completely different things. The older woman tried to wake David, but he was unconscious now. His breathing was ragged and his skin was cold and clammy. Sarah knew they had minutes, maybe less. She reached for the radio headset and pressed the transmit button. Her voice came out higher than she expected. She said they had an emergency. The pilot was unconscious. She was a 16-year-old girl with no training and she needed help. There was a pause that felt like forever. Then a voice responded. A man from the Regional Air Traffic Control Center. His name was Robert and he told Sarah to stay calm. He asked for her position and she read the coordinates off the GPS screen. They were about 40 miles northeast of Billings. Robert said he was going to help her. He asked if the autopilot was engaged and Sarah said yes. Robert told her that was good. That gave them time to figure out what to do next. But then the plane lurched to the right. Sarah grabbed the control yoke instinctively. The autopilot had disengaged. A red warning light was flashing on the panel. Robert asked what happened and Sarah told him. He was silent for a moment. Then he said she was going to have to fly the plane manually. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at her hands on the yoke. They were trembling so badly she could barely hold on. Robert's voice came through the headset again. He told her to take a deep breath. He said he had guided people through situations like this before. He said she could do this. But Sarah did not believe him. She was just a kid. She had never even driven a car by herself. How was she supposed to fly a plane? The aircraft started to dip. The nose was pointing down and the altimeter was dropping. 10,000 feet, 9,500. Robert told her to pull back gently on the yoke. Just a little bit. Sarah pulled and the nose started to rise. Too much. The plane climbed sharply and the engine strained. Robert told her to ease off. Sarah pushed the yoke forward slightly and the plane leveled out. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Robert kept talking. He told her she was doing great. He said the most important thing was to keep the wings level and maintain her altitude. He would guide her to the nearest airport. Sarah tried to focus on his instructions, but her mind was screaming. The passengers were silent behind her. She could feel their fear. It matched her own. Robert asked her to check her fuel gauge. Sarah scanned the panel and found it. They had about 40 minutes of fuel left. Maybe less. Robert said that was enough. The airport in Billings was 20 minutes away. He was going to talk her through the approach and landing. But first she needed to practice flying straight and level. He gave her a heading and told her to turn the plane gently to the left. Sarah turned the yoke and the plane banked. Too steeply. The horizon tilted and her stomach lurched. Robert told her to level out. She corrected and the plane straightened. Robert said she was learning fast. He said most people panic in situations like this, but she was staying focused. Sarah did not feel focused. She felt like she was drowning, but she kept listening to Robert's voice. It was the only thing anchoring her to reality. He told her to adjust her altitude to 8,000 feet. He walked her through using the throttle and the trim. It was like trying to solve a puzzle while falling off a cliff. Every input affected something else. Push the throttle and the nose rises. Pull it back and the nose drops. Adjust the trim and the plane wants to climb or dive. Sarah made tiny adjustments and watched the instruments. Slowly, painfully, she started to understand how the plane responded. Robert told her they were going to start the approach soon. He said another pilot was taking off from Billings to fly alongside her. His name was Captain Miller, and he had 30 years of experience. He would be her eyes and help her line up with the runway. But that would take time. For now, Sarah had to keep the plane in the air. She glanced at David. The older woman was still trying to revive him, but Sarah could see it was not working. His lips were blue. His chest barely moved. She forced herself to look away. She could not think about that now. She had to focus on flying. Robert gave her a new heading. She was approaching Billings from the northeast. The airport was straight ahead, about 15 miles out. Robert said he was going to guide her through the descent. She needed to reduce her altitude gradually. No sudden moves. Sarah pulled back the throttle slightly and the plane started to descend. 7,000 feet, 6,500. The ground was getting closer. She could see buildings and roads and cars. It all looked so small and fragile. Robert told her she was doing perfectly. He said to keep her current rate of descent. Captain Miller's voice came through the headset. He said he was off her left wing. Sarah looked out and saw a small plane flying beside her. It was the most reassuring thing she had ever seen. Captain Miller said he was going to help her line up with the runway. He told her to follow his instructions exactly. He would tell her when to turn and how much. Sarah followed every command. Turn left 10 degrees, level out, reduce speed. The runway appeared in the distance. A long strip of grey concrete surrounded by empty fields. It looked impossibly narrow. Captain Miller told her she was lined up perfectly. Robert took over on the radio. He said they were going to start the final approach. Sarah was at 4,000 feet. The runway was 3 miles ahead. Robert told her to reduce her speed to 90 knots. Sarah pulled back the throttle and watched the airspeed indicator drop. 95, 92, 90. The plane felt sluggish, like it was barely staying in the air. Robert said that was normal. He told her to keep the nose slightly up and maintain her glide path. 3,000 feet, 2,500. The runway was getting bigger. Sarah could see the numbers painted on the concrete. Runway 27. Robert told her to deploy the flaps. Sarah found the flap control and moved it to the first position. The plane shuddered and slowed down even more. Captain Miller said she was doing great. He said to keep it steady. 2,000 feet, 1,500, 1,000. The ground was rushing up now. Sarah could see cars parked near the terminal. People standing outside watching. Emergency vehicles lined up along the runway. Robert told her to keep her eyes on the far end of the runway. Do not look down. Keep the wings level. 500 feet, 300. Captain Miller told her to flare. Pull back gently on the yoke. Sarah pulled back and the nose lifted. The plane seemed to hang in the air for a moment. Then the wheels touched down hard. The plane bounced back into the air. Sarah's heart stopped. Robert told her to stay calm. Let it settle. The wheels hit again. This time they stayed down. The plane rolled down the runway. Sarah remembered David telling her about brakes. She pressed the pedals at the top of the rudder controls, and the plane started to slow. It veered slightly to the right. She corrected with the rudder. The plane rolled to a stop halfway down the runway. Sarah sat there, frozen, her hands still gripping the yoke. She could not move, could not breathe, could not believe she was alive. The passengers behind her were crying. The older woman was sobbing with relief. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane within seconds. Paramedics rushed on board and pulled David out. They worked on him right there on the tarmac. Sarah climbed out of the cockpit on shaking legs. Captain Miller landed right after her and ran over. He wrapped her in a hug and told her she had just done something incredible. Robert's voice came through her headset one last time. He said he was proud of her. Sarah pulled off the headset and sank to the ground. The adrenaline was wearing off and the reality of what had just happened was crashing over her. She had flown a plane. She had landed it. She had saved 4 lives, including her own. David survived. The paramedics got his heart beating again and rushed him to the hospital. He had emergency surgery and spent 2 weeks in intensive care. But he pulled through. When Sarah visited him, he smiled and told her she was a natural pilot. Sarah shook her head. She said she never wanted to fly again. But David said she would change her mind. He said once you taste the sky, you never really leave it. He was right. Sarah went back to school and tried to focus on normal teenage things. But she could not stop thinking about that day. About the moment when everything depended on her. About the choice between panic and action. She started reading about aviation, watching videos, studying flight manuals. 6 months later, she enrolled in ground school. Her parents were terrified, but they supported her. They had seen something change in their daughter. A confidence that had not been there before, a certainty about who she was and what she was capable of. Sarah earned her private pilot license at 18. She became a flight instructor at 22. Today, she flies for a regional carrier and teaches young pilots on the side. She tells them that flying is not about being fearless. It is about acting even when you are terrified. It is about trusting yourself when no one else can help you. And it is about understanding that the moments that define us are the ones where we refuse to give up. Every time Sarah sits in a cockpit, she thinks about that Saturday morning in Montana. About her uncle's pale face, and the red warning lights, and the voice on the radio that kept her grounded. She thinks about the impossible choice that became the only choice, and she remembers that sometimes the people who surprise us most are ourselves. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.